The International Energy Agency has warned that disruption to global oil supplies from the Middle East will worsen this month, and jet fuel and diesel supplies to Europe will be impacted by April or May. Taoiseach Micheál Martin says if the war continues, an energy supply shock will hit the economy. Ryanair CEO Michael O'Leary also issued a warning that disruption to jet fuel supplies may kick in during early May, with a risk of disruption to flights in Europe in the early summer months.
As this energy crisis worsens, ensuring aircraft aren't grounded is now emerging as a big concern. Supplies of aviation fuel are shipped here to Dublin Port. They're then transported by truck to Dublin Airport. But aviation fuel is now emerging as a key concern for Ireland. And that's a problem because it's a country on an island.
If the war continues and if the Hormuz Strait remains closed, then you have a supply shock hitting the economy. And one of the earlier areas where it'll hit will be aviation.
Ryanair boss Michael O'Leary warned about potential disruption if the conflict continues.
Maybe 10, 20, 25% of our supplies might be at risk through May and June. So, like everybody else in the industry, we hope that this war ends sooner rather than later.
And the International Energy Agency has also highlighted concerns about supplies.
The biggest problem today is the lack of jet fuel and diesel. We are seeing it already in Asia, but in April it will come to Europe.
And in Australia, the Prime Minister called on residents to conserve fuel.
And over coming weeks, if you can switch to catching the train or bus or tram to work, do so. That builds our reserves and it saves fuel for people who have no choice but to drive.
Here, the government said it's working on plans for a public information campaign for people to conserve fuel. The fact that residents will be asked to cut back on energy use shows how serious this situation has rapidly become. David Murphy, RTÉ News.
Donald Trump has claimed that Iran asked him for a ceasefire. The US military action in Iran could end in 2 to 3 weeks, and that he is considering pulling out of NATO. Iran has rejected the ceasefire claim and struck oil tankers and fuel depots across the region again today.
High fuel prices are an afterthought for Mustafa, who lost his house in southern Lebanon during Israel's attacks last year. He rebuilt his life in Beirut's southern suburbs, only to lose his second home and business in airstrikes this week. It's a terrifying and sad feeling. An entire life's work in an instant, in the blink of an eye, turns to dust, said his wife Haifa. More homes were destroyed in Tehran this morning as Donald Trump again promised to end the war.
I would say that within 2 weeks, maybe 3, when we feel that they are, for a long period of time, put into the Stone Ages and they won't be able to come up with a nuclear weapon, then we'll leave, whether we have a deal or not.
President Trump also told British media that he's considering leaving NATO, calling the alliance a paper tiger, something UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer was quick to refute.
NATO is the single most effective military alliance the world has ever seen. I've been absolutely clear that this is not our war, and we're not going to get dragged into it.
But everyone is being affected by rising oil prices, as Iranian missiles hit another oil tanker off the coast of Qatar and fuel tanks at Kuwait International Airport. This afternoon, President Trump claimed Iran had asked for a ceasefire that he would consider were the Strait of Hormuz to reopen. But Tehran denied the claim, and the regime was sending a very different message, as President Masoud Pezeshkian walked the streets with supporters, alongside his foreign minister, who vowed to keep fighting on for at least 6 months. This drone strike in Iraq evidence that Iran has the arsenal to do so. In Beirut, Mustafa says he's lived his entire life in war. As others worry how they'll be able to fuel their cars, people across the Middle East worry if they'll survive another day. Fergal Gallagher, RTÉ News.
Well, let's get more on all of this now. We can speak to our Washington correspondent, Jackie Fox, and our political correspondent, Micheál Martin. Jackie, to you first. We know President Trump is due to speak later. Any idea of what he's going to say?
We don't know exactly what President Donald Trump is going to say tonight, Sharon, but he has been teasing what he would like to say, giving out about NATO, threatening to leave the alliance. Technically, he can't do that. That's the job of Congress, by the way. But from looking and listening to Donald Trump and Trump administration officials over the last 24 hours, it appears that this speech won't be a declaration to the end of this operation, more trying to convince the American public to stick with him. Maybe something about a ceasefire or direct talks with Iran, trying to say that this will end very soon. But Donald Trump has said that this will end very soon around 12 times since this operation started. And Sharon, I don't think Donald Trump, he didn't have a choice here to address the nation. He had to. His approval ratings are tanking. It is now $4 per gallon for petrol here in the United States. And it appears that patience may be waning within the Republican Party, especially with the build-up of US troops in the Middle East. But we'll find out in a couple of hours what exactly President Donald Trump has to say. It'll be at 9 p.m. local time here in Washington, D.C., or 2 a.m. Irish time if anybody wants to stay up and watch.
All right, Micheál Martin, we know the government here is monitoring events, but is there a plan yet to introduce any further type of restrictions?
A government spokesperson insisting this evening that there is nothing imminent. Indeed, the government today looking ahead to the budget and setting the date for that as the 6th of October. But those who sat around the cabinet table said that uncertainty was in the background all the time. And I think many of them feel perhaps it is only a matter of time before further support measures for businesses and households will be necessary as a result of this uncertainty. When it comes to the big questions, though, the possibility perhaps of the rationing of fuel, the Transport Minister asked directly about that today, Darragh O'Brien answering that the country was not in that space right now. But of course, the government is working on that public awareness campaign, which will call on people to use energy and fuel far more sparingly. Now, the Taoiseach talking about that economic shock that could hit the country if there is an energy supply shortage. What would that look like? Well, again, people in government not openly speculating, but talking about the 1970s fuel crisis. Of course, that saw prices rise across the board. There was also things like car-free Sundays. But when it comes to a national crisis, and you heard Jackie there talking about a public address and a national address in the US, there is no indication here and no plan at all that the Taoiseach will have to go before the country and make such an address. So I suppose it is for the moment and remains a watch and see approach here.
Political correspondent Micheál Martin and Washington correspondent Jackie Fox, thank you both.
During Donald Trump's first presidency, Kirsten Fontenrose was his senior director of the Gulf on the US National Security Council. Earlier, I spoke to Ms. Fontenrose about the ongoing war in Iran. I began by asking her what we can expect from the president's address to the American people later tonight.
He's going to talk very likely about where we are in Iran. He needs to reassure his domestic public, and he needs to answer some questions that people have about where the strategy is going. So I think you'll hear him say that the U.S. has achieved its military objectives. So if he chose to, he could end the war tomorrow, or let's say April 6th, when Iran owes him an answer on the 15 points his envoys put forward. So those military objectives: destroy the Navy, destroy the missile program, prevent Iran from being able to build a nuclear weapon. These programs involve not just facilities, but also capability and intent. That's why they're full programs. So he's also going to talk about the leadership being eliminated, the scientists and the political elites who are part of those programs. He's going to communicate about the new people he says that the administration is talking to. I don't know whether he'll give clarity on whether that is Ghalibaf, the Speaker of the House, or whether he'll leave it vague. There are concerns, legitimate concerns, about anyone in Iran that might be talking to the U.S. administration, of course, being in some sort of danger if there are hardliners and other factions of the regime remnants who don't want to see that conversation take place. So we don't know if he'll necessarily mention an interlocutor on the Iranian side. He'll probably also talk about shipping increasingly resuming through Hormuz, and he'll make the point that Hormuz is not America's problem. He'll reiterate the point that the U.S. economy and society are not as dependent on the petroleum products that come through that come through Hormuz, like Europe, like Asia, like parts of South Asia are, and that he expects those partners to rather take care of their own problem in Hormuz.
Because today we see, sorry to cut across you, today we see that the UK is convening a meeting this week of 35 different countries to discuss possibly reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Does that indicate that the US is prepared to leave without securing the reopening of the Strait?
Remember that President Trump usually negotiates by asking for 200% so that he can get to 100% of what he's asking for. And so by threatening to leave, he's telling Europe and he's telling Asia and he's telling India, this is not something we are going to prioritize. We've had national security objectives. We've been really clear about those 4 objectives since we came into this war. And if you all want Hormuz open because it's impacting your economies, you're going to have to contribute to that or do it yourself. I do think that if you saw those 25 countries really come forth with something that was robust, that President Trump would keep the U.S. involved in trying to reopen the straits as well.
Critics of the United States, though, Kirsten, sorry to cut across you, critics of the United States and the President will look at this and they will fail to see what the U.S. has really achieved from this. They see an emboldened Iran, an energy crisis, a potential food crisis, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, and they will say that this was a real miscalculation on Donald Trump's part, and he's leaving other countries to clean up his mess.
On the U.S. side, the administration sees it very differently. They see that you now have an Iran that is not capable of developing a nuclear weapon, certainly not in the short term, which has been the largest concern, not capable of advanced missile development, not in the numbers and range we've been very concerned with. Same goes for the drone program. Does not have any sort of ability to arm or fund the proxies, these armed militias with which it has been destabilizing Iraq, Yemen, Lebanon, Syria for ages, and that you have the lack of leadership and know-how related to these programs within Iran. So you have a more hardline regime potentially, but without any teeth or claws. That is what you will see the U.S. saying. When they are asked about things like the oil crisis or the impact on the Strait of Hormuz, this is when the administration says, why are you all not standing up and addressing your own problem? Because to the U.S., the impacts just have not been felt as badly as they are in the rest of the world. Americans complain about oil prices.
Iran has always...
But it's really not great.
Sorry to cut across you. So Iran has always been high on the foreign policy agenda of Donald Trump, even during his first presidency when you were on his National Security Council. Did he want to intervene like this in terms of Iran during that first term? What were the conversations happening at that time?
No, the possibility of regime change or taking out these capabilities within Iran is a constant discussion among American policymakers, has been for the 40 years of this regime, but it's always in contingency planning. The U.S. Department of Defense is fantastic at planning, and then you put those plans on the shelves in the event that you ever need them. We did not get a demand for brushing those off and implementing. We got constant questions about what is in the realm of the possible. But one of the big questions was who would take over day after, or who is really the demand signal coming from? How much of a constituency on the ground do they have? Are these only diaspora-based groups, or are they coming from inside? So what's different this time also is this real demand from protest groups inside the country, not simply from large diaspora organizations that are based in Europe or the US. That demand signal differentiates this from places like Iraq and Afghanistan as well.
Just finally, Kirsten, and briefly, if you could, Donald Trump has made very clear that he is frustrated with NATO allies. He has also said that he's considering pulling the US out of NATO. He has made this threat before. Do you think he's minded to carry through this time?
For a while, we thought that the threat had essentially paid off in the form that NATO countries were increasing the amount of funding they were spending on their own defense, and that happened just in time to get them slightly better prepared for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But now, unfortunately, again, this Hormuz issue is bringing to light to the administration the fact that, again, the U.S. is expected to provide, but is never given the benefits of NATO membership. So you probably will have revived calls from within parts of the administration, parts that are more on the right, that are more isolationist, saying, see, we told you there's no benefit to America. Bring those NATO funds home, bolster our own defense, look at our southern border, feed the children in America. You will definitely see that argument being made. And I think at this point, it's up to NATO to make the argument for President Trump that there are benefits to American membership.
Kirsten Fontenrose of the Atlantic Council and former Senior Director of Gulf Affairs on the US National Security Council during Donald Trump's first term. Thanks indeed for talking to us on 6-1.